Have you ever driven past these limestone hills in the Gunung Rapat or Tambun and wondered what secrets do these hills keep? What if I told you that beneath the beauty of these hills and cliffs and behind the quiet streets of Ampang Baru, there were once men hiding armed, dangerous and fighting a secret war? It's hard to imagine, right? Well, today, these places are homes to bustling morning markets, quiet housing estates and famous food spots. But decades ago, these areas were no-go zones, shrouded in fear and secrecy. British soldiers patrolled the streets, helicopters secured the jungles, and deep inside the limestone caves, communist insurgents planned their next ambush. Now, this is part of history that many have forgotten or you might not have heard about. Today, we are going to uncover the hidden war that played out in the hills and jungles of Gunung Rapat, Ampang Baru and Tambun. Hey everyone, welcome back to this episode. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the past, back to a time when Ipoh wasn't just about coffee shops and tin mining. It was a battleground in a secret war. A war that wasn't fought with tanks and airstrikes, but with whispers, ambushes, and a constant game of cat and mouse between the British forces and the communist insurgents. The Malayan Emergency lasted from 1948 to 1960, but its aftershocks continued well into the 70s and even in the early 80s. Now, during this time, many areas around Ipoh became key hotspots in the conflict. And why? Because Ipoh wasn't just a tin mining hub. It was surrounded by dense forests, limestone caves, and hidden trails. Perfect terrain for guerrilla warfare. Gunung Rapat today is known for its cave temples, great food, and residential neighbourhoods. But during the emergency, these limestone hills provided the perfect cover for communist fighters. Now, picture this: British patrols marching through the narrow jungle paths, rifles ready, ears alert to every sound. They knew the enemy was near, but they couldn't see them. The communists were experts at camouflage, using the caves and thick vegetation to their advantages. Some of these caves weren't just hiding places, they were operational bases, storing weapons, supplies, and propaganda materials. Now, villagers in the area lived in fear. Some were sympathetic to the communists and provided food or intelligence. Others were just terrified, caught between two sides. If they were caught helping the insurgents, the British would punish them. But if they refused, they risked being targeted by the communists themselves. Gunung Rapat was more than just a hiding place. It was a silent witness to war, fought in the shadows. To understand what happened to places like Gunung Rapat, Ampang Baru and Tambun, we need to look at the bigger picture. After World War II, Malaya was in chaos. The Japanese occupation has just ended and the British were trying to re-establish control. But in the shadows, something else was brewing. The Malayan Communist Party, MCP, had gained strength during the war, and many of its members, particularly those in the Malayan National Liberation Army, MNLA, refused to put down their weapons. They saw the British rule as another form of colonial oppression and wanted to establish a communist state. And so the conflict began. Guerrilla warfare spread across the country, and Perak became one of the most affected states. The British declared a state of emergency, sending in troops and police forces to hunt down the insurgents. But the communists were smart. They didn't fight in open battles. They hid in jungles, moved through secret trails, and blended in with local villages. Now, this is where Gunung Rapat, Ampang Baru and Tambun come into play. Ampang Baru today is a peaceful residential area, but back then it was part of the insurgent silent highway. A series of jungle paths and hidden trails connected different communist hideouts, allowing them to move between Gunung Rapat, Tambun and other parts of Perak. The British knew about these trails, but closing them down was another story. Every time they launched a search, the communists would slip away, melting into the jungle. This was their advantage. They knew the land better than anyone. So one of the biggest challenges for the British was identifying who was an insurgent and who was just a local villager. The communists didn't wear uniforms. They blended in with the population, making it almost impossible to distinguish friend from foe. The war in Ampang Baru, like in the rest of Ipoh, wasn't just fought with bullets. It was fought with psychological warfare. Both sides used fear, misinformation and intimidation to control the people. And for the local survival meant staying silent. If you visit these areas today, you won't see much evidence of the war that once raged here. The jungles have thinned, the trails have disappeared, and the caves that once hid soldiers are now tourist spots. But if you look closely, history is still there. Some old-timers in the area still remember the fear, the checkpoints, and the whispers of the communist movements in the night. Some say that if you venture deep in the forest, you might still find remnants of old camps, rusted tin cans, decaying wooden structures, and hidden tunnels long forgotten. This war shaped the Ipoh we know today. It was a war of survival, ideology, and control. And the people who lived through it, whether they were soldiers, civilians, or even former insurgents, carried those memories for the rest of their lives. So, next time you pass by Gunung Rapat or eat a pamelo in Tambun, take a moment to reflect. These places weren't always peaceful. They were once battlegrounds filled with fear, resistance, and the fight for a future we now take for granted. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who loves history or has roots in Ipoh. And if you have any family members who lived through this era, ask them about it. You might be surprised at the stories they tell you. Thank you for watching this episode, and until next time, I remind you, every street and hill has a story. All you need to do is listen.